good. Guys, it's so good to see you. I decided to take a break for the past year and a half. It was just me. So thanks for coming back for the premiere of Drug Test, Part 2. So I have a lot to tell you about. I did a lot of drugs over the past year and a half. So a lot to catch up on. Okay, some of them with a lot of you in the audience. Okay. All right, we do have some newcomers tonight, so I thought I'd recap. Why do I do this show? I do this show because this is our usual drug education.
This is your brain on drugs.
Hey, guess what? This is not your brain on drugs. This is your brain on drugs.
Any questions?
Yes, many. Firstly, who makes one egg? Secondly, why is a fried egg worse than a raw egg? Isn't the raw egg more dangerous for you? Anyway, many questions. One of my questions that's sort of a grounding question for the show is, what is a drug? A drug is an excuse for an applause break. What is a drug? So usually we get our drugs from this guy or our drugs from this guy. The important thing is that you get your drugs from somebody in a coat, whether it's a trench or a lab. That is the most important part of drug culture. But what actually is a drug when you think about it? Because a drug can't just be something that changes your mind, because food changes your mind. You know, if you're not hungry, are you really yourself? According to Snickers commercials, no, you're not. So what is a drug? So I found this handy definition online that says a drug is defined as a substance recognized by official pharmacopoeia or formulary. This is kind of a cop-out. It's a tautology. It's essentially saying a chair is a substance that is recognized by a chair directory. And what really doesn't make this very helpful is that this definition comes from the Food and Drug Administration, which is the drug pharmacopoeia. Anyway, so what is a drug? Well, here's a little surprise for all of you. You're already on a drug. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's not love. It is an extremely potent drug. It is highly controversial at this point in time. It can get you sick for a little bit. It's injected intravenously, and it's the vaccine! Woo! Yeah! The greatest drug of 2020 and /2021, I would argue. So the vaccine, pretty great drug, liked the high, didn't like the side effects, but yeah, it's pretty good, kind of mellow. So we don't really know a lot of the faces of the people who created this drug, which is unfortunate because it is developed by awesome scientists over many years and before COVID even existed. And so one of those, two of those amazing scientists is this fucking vaccine power couple. Their names, yeah, give it up for these people. All right, their names are Ur Shaheen and Özlem Tereger. Yes! Nailed it. Anyway, these two worked with Pfizer and a company called Biotech to help create one of many vaccines, but this one was a particularly potent one, 95% effective at the first trial. Anyway, but what's really cool is that they're married. I know. You can just feel the sexual tension. Some might even say chemistry. I know. Get ready for a lot of puns, guys. Anyway, but here's something interesting about the Pfizer vaccine, about all vaccines when you think about it. So in order for them to be popularly distributed, vaccines have to prove their efficacy. How do you prove your efficacy? You have two groups. One's a control group, and one is a group that actually gets the vaccine. They go out into the world. In this case, it was 21,830 volunteers. So this many people went out into the world without the vaccine, and 162 of them got COVID. Given all of the trials, a lot of people died. So a lot of people died in order for us to have the vaccine, because that way it showed its efficacy. And I think that's a really important thing to think about, that people died so that we could have the vaccine. So it's really, it's gratitude. So all of you live streamers who couldn't come here tonight because you didn't get vaccinated, consider it. I strongly recommend it. Great high, very cheap. Anyway, Vaccine. But back to drugs, because as fun as it is to sell AstraZeneca on the street, let's talk about other drugs. Because usually the way things go is that the government bans drugs and doesn't mandate them. So let's talk about the common sense of drugs. Okay, I have a theory about drugs. A drug is a substance that is psychoactive, people enjoy it, and most people don't use it. So, for example, mercury is psychoactive. It does change your mind, but people don't like it and people don't use it. Caffeine is a substance that changes your mind. People enjoy it. But the thing is, most people use it. It's not that rare. So a drug is something that surprisingly is contingent on this last part, something that most people don't use. So here's an example. 90% of the world is regularly on caffeine. That means they're in an altered state when they're off caffeine. It's one of the only drugs that you notice when you're off of it. 86% of America has tried alcohol at some point in its life. I think they're lying. I think it's way higher. 50% of America have tried marijuana at some point in their life. Yeah. Wow, I'm surprised. People like marijuana here? What? Anyway, as marijuana increases in use, people are less and less inclined to call it a drug, whereas only 10% of Americans have claimed they've used psychedelics, and so therefore it is more, I know, Aw is right, poor saps. Anyway, not like us, right? 90% of the world is really missing out. 90% of the world does not understand the movie Inception. Anyway. So it's still considered a drug because, frankly, not that many people use it. So that's my theory of what a drug is. Now, there is one drug I find very interesting because only 1% of the world claims to have ever tried it. But in reality, that number is probably more like 50% or higher. Now, what could this drug possibly be? You guys may have a bit of an inclination of what that drug might be. But it's actually ketamine! Yeah! Woo! Ketamine! Yeah! Have some great ketamine! Yeah! All right. Okay, tech crew at Caveat, I promise to clean that up. Okay. Anyway, Special K, very, very interesting drug because while 1% of people claims to have tried it, it's actually significantly more. According to this, random guy on the street I met called the World Health Organization, they call it the most widely used anesthetic in the world and an essential medicine. So why is this so widely distributed? Because it's extremely useful. Why is it so extremely useful? Because unlike its other competitor, morphine, which is a very potent anesthesia, ketamine doesn't depress your ability to breathe, which actually has a huge effect. It means that people don't need to lug these things around, these giant respiratory systems, which also rely on electricity, which in the developing world isn't always super reliable. Ketamine is very portable, very easy to use. It is the smartphone of anesthesia. Anyway, so it's super common. What is ketamine? Well, ketamine is a ketone and an amine. We all know what that means. No need to say anything more. My takeaway from this little bit of chemistry for you is that ketamine is keto-friendly. So just FYI. Got some keto pot people in the audience. Good to know if I need an applause break. Okay, so that is what ketamine is. But here's another thing that ketamine is. Surprisingly, an analog of PCP. Yes, angel dust. So, but you're not going to be eating anybody's face on ketamine. And here's why. By the way, with the whole eating of the face thing, let's just take a quick break. Anytime a drug comes out, there is what I like to call the eating of one's face rule. It is a diminishing amount of time and an increasing probability that a news story is going to come out claiming somebody ate somebody's face on that drug. So just watch out for it. Anytime a new drug comes into existence, somebody's going to eat somebody's face on it. Anyway, so PCP had a lot of terrible side effects. People were moving too much, essentially, during surgery and really agitated. Ketamine, not so much. And the reason that they are analogs is because they just look similar, and I guess according to chemists, these things look similar. I don't know. Anyway, so an analog, what is an analog? Well, a cherry is kind of an analog to an apple because it's a fruit, and it's red, and it's round. So here's an example. Jessica Chastain is an analog of Bryce Dallas Howard. So you're all chemists now. Okay, history, a little bit of history. 1962, ketamine was synthesized by this guy who looks extremely happy about it. Was synthesized by an American scientist named Calvin Stevens at the Parke-Davis lab. But more interestingly and importantly, 2 years later, it was first used on humans by a guy named Edward Domino, who then in 1965 made an account of his first recreational experiment, which looked like this. Accurate. Anyway, so what's interesting is that he described the experience to his wife. That's what at least they say. I'm pretty sure she tried it too. And she coined the term dissociative anesthetic, which is a really good description of what ketamine is. Now, I scoured the internet for a picture of her, and I couldn't find it anywhere, so I just used this picture of Tilda Swinton as a stand-in for her, because I assume that's what she looked like. Very common look. And this makes them one of many ketamine power couples. As you can see, there's a repeated motif of people in the study of chemistry who come up with drugs as couples, like Sasha and Anne Shulgin. So just like an interesting note. Okay, so the domino effect. So the dominoes widely describe how ketamine works, and it arrives just in time for the Vietnam War. It's used in the Vietnam War. It's very helpful because soldiers can get it in the battlefield, and they can move off the battlefield, unlike with morphine, where they're pretty much one and done. So ketamine is very helpful. It also has an interesting side effect, which is that it helps the soldiers not just get over the pain of the surgery, but the trauma of being in a war. And that is an interesting effect that gets researched about 50 years later. So ends one war, the Vietnam War, but so begins another. So this is Nixon signing into effect a bill that would implement the war on drugs, which has been in effect for about 50 years. And it classifies ketamine as one of many drugs that are scheduled and therefore prohibited. You may be able to tell by later on the show, I'm not a fan. So, war on drugs. Current legal status. I'm not too worried, by the way, about this guy because I'm pretty sure he can outrun this cop. Anyway. Current legal status, ketamine is legal for medical use and off-label use, kind of relatedly currently. It was a Schedule II, now a Schedule III drug, which means it's illegal to possess, gift, or sell, which could lead you up to 5 years in prison for possession and up to 14 years in prison for distribution. Just fun facts. Anyway, so what are the problems of criminalization? One of them is possible contamination. As Doug Stanhope said, you never crack open a Miller Lite and you worry that it's poison. With ketamine, not so much. Here's an example, the thrills and perils of the underground market. Sometimes the cocaine turns out to be ketamine, and then this happens. You turn into a rainbow cat. Sometimes you're doing a line of cocaine and you just want to come up with a fascinating financial business plan, and instead, you're on ketamine and you want to feel the grass and start a podcast. All right, so contamination effect, that's an issue, but here's a frickin' solution. Test before you ingest. There's a fantastic organization called Dance Safe that offers kits where you can actually test ketamine. These just came out, and in fact, I have one. They look like this. This is a container that includes some chemicals that you put on top of a tiny sample of whatever it is you're testing. Then it's just like a fun chemistry experiment. It turns special colors, very psychedelic. They know their audience. And you can determine if it's pure ketamine, and it's really, really helpful. Speaking of that, while I can, Narcan, this one is naloxone. Naloxone kits are available all over the city. They're free, very important. You know, today a very famous actor just died from an overdose. So if he had had this on hand, that maybe wouldn't have happened. So naloxone, free and available. I strongly recommend looking into getting them. Anyway, and also it's like it's sort of like the Maury Povich show where you can be like, and the test results are in. It's not ketamine! And you have a little party. Okay, so dance-safe kits, use them. Here's some street names for ketamine to be aware of. Special K, Cat Valium, Cocaine PM. We got Kmart, K Sarah, JK Rowling, and drugs are bad, K. And I may have made up most of these. But I'm trying to get them going, so, you know, everybody use Cocaine PM. Anyway, so another side effect of criminalization is bad education. There's a lot of myths floating around about ketamine, like this one.
Ketamine counteracts adrenaline.
Ketamine does not counteract adrenaline. That is just Jason Statham being Jason Statham. Here's another one.
Well, he's on a lot of ketamine.
What's that?
Horse tranquilizer.
Horse tranquilizer. What an interesting subject to bring up now. Is ketamine a horse tranquilizer? This was one of my favorite images I found online, and I like just say nay to drugs. So yeah, interesting topical subject. Ketamine, taking drugs for horses before it was cool. Right now, a lot of people are into this ivermectin drug for COVID-19. Don't recommend. But I do recommend ketamine. Other drugs for horses are great because here's the thing. Yes, ketamine is a horse tranquilizer, but guess what? It's also a kitten tranquilizer. It's also a baby tranquilizer. Because here's a bucket of horse aspirin. Anything can be a tranquilizer if you up the dose horse style, okay? Just to prove my point that anything can be bad for you if you take the same dose as a horse, here's a bucket of horse Viagra. Don't take it. Take a human-sized amount of horse Viagra. So you're not going to stop taking aspirin or Viagra just because horses also take it in bucket form. Okay, so that's a little bit about this theme that I'm really into, which is the devil is in the dose. This comes from Paracelsus, and then more importantly, also from The Simpsons. Here's Homer's favorite food, but just at a slightly larger quantity than he might have wanted. So anything could be dangerous. Frankly, almost anything could kill you at a high enough dose. Don't believe me? Like eating toothpaste. If you're 75 kilograms and you have 33 tubes of toothpaste all at once, it will kill you. Like coffee, 78 shots of espresso, it'll kill you. Like alcohol, just 13 shots of liquor immediately, it'll kill you. You like water? Well, you have 6 liters of water, and actually, it'll counteract adrenaline. Just kidding, it'll kill you. Okay, devil's in the dose. Hope I made that part clear. Be careful with the fucking dosing. Anyway, everyone's asking, is it a horse tranquilizer? No one's asking, why does it make the horse tranquil? Yeah. So why does ketamine make the horse tranquil? How does it work? Well, it went from helping in combat to combating depression. In 2000, a Yale scientist discovered that ketamine had very promising results in curing depression. Here's some stats. 70 to 80% of people had a positive response to ketamine at the time. Now it's a little bit more like 60% with repeated trials. But this is opposed to about a third of people who respond to SSRIs. So it's very, very promising. There's a huge crowd of people who are treatment resistant. Okay, ketamine may also help with other things, like, for example, chronic pain. This is the only thing currently that you can get ketamine covered by your insurance for, ketamine infusions, but also can help with PTSD, OCD, migraines, anxiety, fibromyalgia, and interesting topics for shows at Caveat. So, can cure a lot of things. Ketamine has changed our understanding of depression. So we used to think of depression just simply with the serotonin theory, which is pretty simple. It's more serotonin, more happy. It is kind of demonstrated by this meme, the one molecule of serotonin trying to keep me going throughout the day. But instead, this works on the glutamate system, our most excitatory neurotransmitter, and so it's very complicated. So I'm going to explain it to you with Seinfeld GIFs. Okay, so here are your neurons of a depressed person. They're lazy. It's a show about nothing. They're not doing anything. They're not doing what they're supposed to do, releasing neurotransmitters. And so glutamate comes into the system, and it comes into the system in the form of Elaine from Seinfeld. And she excites your neurons. They're excited now, and they start doing their job. They get interested in other neurotransmitters. So here's an example. Here's the excited neuron, and boom, other neurotransmitters. Yeah, it eventually forgets about the glutamate after about a month. Here once again, and other neurotransmitters, and fuck the glutamate. Yeah, happiness. Okay, that's the glutamate thing. So is ketamine a psychedelic? This comes up a lot. How might it be like a psychedelic? Well, it gives you visual trails at high doses, lowered ego and default mode network, has less cerebral blood flow, gives you the noetic quality, the feeling of really knowing something profoundly, a feeling of universality and connectedness, dilated sense of time, and increased likelihood of wanting to start a podcast. So kind of like a psychedelic. Here's how it's not like a psychedelic. It's not from a plant. There's no history of use in native people populations. It's not a tryptamine. Chemically, it's super dissimilar from the classical psychedelics. Also, it helped the war in Vietnam. Most psychedelics did not do that. And then finally, it did not improve the Beatles. So maybe not a psychedelic. So is ketamine a psychedelic? It depends on whether a psychedelic is a chemical or an experience. And maybe, honestly, it's just a psychedelic because you know it when you feel it, sort of like this guy right here who knows it's a psychedelic. Anyway, so in my opinion, did I feel like ketamine was a psychedelic in the infusion that I had? And the answer is fucking yes. If that is not the face of a person on a psychedelic, I don't know what is. I am seeing a many-headed God telling me the future and loving me. So yeah, it felt fucking like a psychedelic. Okay, that's me. So my infusion. I just had an infusion 2 weeks ago, and I'm still here. So yeah, thank you, Rich. Anyway, here's a little bit about my infusion. So the set. I had a medical intake with this guy, Dr. Stephen Radowitz. I have depression and anxiety for about several years, possibly bipolar 2. I operate under a depression diagnosis. And so I take 300 milligrams of gabapentin, 100 of Lamotrigine. This did not have too many contraindications with the ketamine. You would do a similar medical intake with whatever clinic you would go to. In fact, these may have lessened the effects of the ketamine, but I did not find the ketamine to be super mild, as you will soon find out. So they did not do that for me. Also, we set my intention. My intention was simply mind expansion, not super therapeutic, which affected the dose that they gave me. So that is the set, my mindset. Here's the setting. I went to the New Shama Clinic in the Upper East Side. Here is their QR code if you're interested in them, because they're offering free medical assessments for drug test viewers like you. And so you can find out if you're maybe interested in this stuff. I found my experience on the whole a very good experience. So here's the thing. It's fucking expensive, in my opinion, to get ketamine. The only reason you could have it covered by your insurance is, frankly, if you have chronic pain. So here's my tip if you want like a really big discount. In fact, if you want to have an infusion for free. Host a show about psychedelics for 3 years, and then do a hilarious event about ketamine clinics, and then get a free session. So that's my tip for you all. Okay, so that's the setting. Here's what it looked like. So right now, Nushama is setting up. As you can tell, I felt a little bit reassured by what was going on in the waiting room. So as you can tell, this kind of setup is fairly clinical. Actually, they're currently setting up their other office, which is a little bit more psychedelic-oriented. You know, there's more Tibetan flags or whatever. But right now, they're operating out of a freestanding surgery center, which was very interesting for me to trip in an extremely clinical place and where I felt very safe, but also unlike anything I've ever tripped in before, and I've tripped in a porta potty and a lot of other places. So this was a real eye-opening experience for me. Just to even say I'm tripping out loud to adults felt strange. Okay, so that was the setting. That's what it looked like. So here's an interesting thing that happened. Hurricane Ida, I don't know if you guys heard about this. So in this case, it knocked out their AC system for that night. It was ready the next day. So I had an interesting experience because it was pretty fucking hot. But I kind of rolled with it because I realized that's actually a traditional way to take psychedelics, a la a sweat lodge. So, you know, I vibed with it. I thought of my peyote brethren, and I made it work. So here was the crew. This is Jay. He's the founder. He was the one who set this up. Yeah, and woo for Jay. And then here was Dr. Elena Osher, the fucking OG, co-founder, anesthesiologist, fucking background in the Russian military using anesthesia, also used ketamine to inseminate gorillas, used ketamine on children. She's fucking done everything you could do with ketamine. A really, you know, kick-ass lady. She also kept referring to my medical intake as my pre-op, like my pre-operation. So really comes from the anesthesia background. Anyway, this is Bera, the integrationist, who was there afterwards to help me talk through everything that happened. Anyway, the dose. So I was on 1 milligram per kilo. I'm 140 pounds, 64 kilograms, so it was 64 milligrams. It lasted 1 hour in Earth time. Okay, so it was about, I don't know, it was about like 60 seconds to about 60 years in ketamine time. Okay, so here's a little bit about the aftermath. I was woozy for about 20 minutes. No nausea, though, thank God. And no noticeable lasting effects that I've found over the past 2 weeks, probably due to my lower dose. Okay, so that is all you pretty much need to know. My infusion, here's the thing, guys. It's very real. I decided not to edit out like all of the juicy, vulnerable parts. So it gets a little bit real. Get ready for some melodrama. And just so you know, the audio is a little fucked because of the fans. And my videographer's name is Grace, and I break the fourth wall a lot, as you'll soon see. So here... Okay, that helps a lot. All right, here we go. I'm going to go hide. This is my infusion.
Hi. This is Dr. Orchard. This is my partner. This is Sarah. And somewhere around there, Vera is. Oh, this is Vera. Vera does all of our integration. So after your infusion.
Well, you know, it's actually the nerve-wracking part for me. It is like totally counterintuitive that I'd be more nervous for a legal drug experience than I would be for my numerous illegal experiences.
But you know, the cool thing about this ketamine is that you're not losing the consciousness.
Yes, yeah.
My patient described it as an amazing experience. And don't worry about the consciousness, you're not giving it to us. You're keeping it for yourself.
My room is ready. All right, let's go. So you guys have a pretty like clinical setup.
I own this center. It's a freestanding surgery center, and I'm an anesthesiologist and pain management.
So your background is anesthesia.
My background is is a dual. I'm a trained neurosurgeon.
Neurosurgeon?
Yes, and so I went through the military services, Russia.
Wow.
Ketamine was a basic drug over there, honestly. Through the trauma, through the combat, through the military services, through the patient transportation, ketamine helped with all those things. Ketamine saved millions of lives.
So you've used it like for all different populations, human, child, animal, soldier, for all different purposes, pain, therapy, depression, mental illness, but you yourself have only done it once for anesthesia.
Yes, I would love to have it when another associate or another doctor is here.
If you need a trip sitter, I'll be your trip sitter.
All right, thank you.
I owe you one. So.
Thank you.
Is that
This is it. No.
Hello.
It's one of the best brands of ketamine. Actually, one of the cleanest brands.
Yeah.
Because it's organic. One of the best brands. Okay.
Is it fair trade, like locally sourced, whole grain ketamine?
No. It's most expensive from all the brands, but we made a conscious choice.
That's the other one?
This is not ketamine. It's promotion. We're always putting it.
So what can you tell me about the dose that you're giving?
It's a 1 milligram per kilo. Two different stages of consciousness. One is out-of-body experience, and second one, the ego dissolution.
Okay, so I'm having a little bit more of like a mind expansion trip rather than an ego dissolution trip,
Correct.
which you might prescribe to somebody dealing with really deep depression that's treatment resistant.
I see for PTSD, really,
PTSD.
right away. I'm starting with these doses for PTSD right away. Ketamine can work as an LSD, as a psilocybin. So you can mimic with ketamine any single of those.
Wait, you're saying that you can mimic with ketamine?
Yes,
the effects
LSD
of-
right now with you.
That is quite a claim. do I have any specifications?
No, you
given
don't.
my-
I went through a PR.
Right. Okay, so I don't get any special,
Yes. So it's a lot of art goes into this.
You're like a psychedelic conductor.
Uh-huh.
So nervous.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Take a deep breath. Okay. That's the only thing what you were nervous about.
No, it's not the needles. I've never done
The
this.
rest is gonna be police.
I'm not used to doing this legally. Somebody else giving me the medicine.
It's too hot in the room. I have to put.
Yeah, we can put the fan on.
Yeah.
Might want your eye mask. Put your eye mask on and I'll hit play.
Hey, here. Don't be nervous.
I wish we could feel this grace. And I wish everyone behind the camera seeing this could feel this. It's unfamiliar to me. Having done recreational doses, very different. It's utterly transporting. There's so much tension and anxiety in the world. Becoming, it's like rewiring the brain and hopefully rewiring society a little bit too. I don't know who's holding my hand, but thank you. It's so wonderful to dedicate my life to making people feel better. That's really
We've tried to heal this so many different ways. And ketamine and the others. It's beautiful. Gorgeous. Your hands. It's connected. Yes. Yes, it's so good. Enjoy. Beautiful. It's beautiful.
Okay. Yeah. I wish you all could have been there. I was thinking about you. Okay, so that was an intense experience. I had an integration with this lovely woman afterwards, but I was going to have a guest on tonight who's just going to talk about ketamine clinics with me, but he was like, hey, why don't I do an integration with you on stage? And I was like, well, fuck, free integration, heck yeah. So everybody, please welcome to the stage one of the best people I know, Andrew Tatarsky.
In the white room,
Hi.
with black curtains near the station. Black roof
All I
country,
have to do is sit there.
no gold pavement.
All right.
Tired
Thank you so much for coming. It's so good to see you. You're a veteran of the show.
I know.
And you still came back.
And you invited me back.
Thank you so much for coming. Is this how most of your integrations go? With like an audience of like 70 people?
We usually have about 10 people.
Oh, 10, just I see. The peanut gallery.
Yeah.
So yeah, you saw this video before as well as now. Is this like typical of like ketamine experience? Did I have like a normal one?
You know, as I was thinking about coming here today, I was thinking that one of the most interesting things about ketamine is people have and maybe psychedelics in general, people have so many varied experiences.
Yeah.
That I think it's difficult or problematic even to try to categorize or sort of presuppose what one's experience is going to be.
Yeah.
It seemed like you had a really kind of completely transformative experience. I mean, you had an ego dissolution experience on a relatively low dose, which was interesting.
Yeah, I was kind of in talks with my integrationist afterwards about whether it was ego dissolving or not, because, you know, I had some sense of where I was. Like, I was like, I'm doing ketamine on the Upper East Side, which somehow really stuck out to me. But, like, at the same time, I very much had an extremely connected experience and definitely did not have was not thinking about myself, that's for sure. So I don't, when people like have ego dissolution, they're like, oh, I've achieved it, I get a little certificate, or do you just not know sometimes?
Well, I wonder if you could say more about what the actual experience was.
Sure, I mean,
rather than getting kind of hung up in the language.
Yeah, I realize I'm trying not to interview you, but let you kind of do the integration part. It's hard to remember because it was by far the hardest I've ever tripped. And I've done a lot of drugs. I don't know if I've mentioned. But it was really intense. It, took a little while to build up. I thought it was going to be like lift off because it's intravenous, but it took a little while. And then I just had a feeling of time pinching and space pinching, and the idea of just sort of living in concepts, living in ideas. And I felt extreme connectedness, and I felt particular connectedness to Russian Jews. I think I was.
And I think there are a few of them in the
Yeah,
audience.
All of you are bad Jews for being here on Rosh Hashanah, by the way.
No, this is the second night. So.
Oh, thank you. Yes. I'm a bad Jew for not knowing that. Jesus.
And we're all here together to celebrate.
Okay, yeah. Shana Tova, this counts as synagogue.
You know, I was thinking I couldn't possibly be funnier than Sarah. But
You're in the driver's seat here, Andrew. But no, I think I was deeply primed by the doctor who had administered the medicine to me, who was Russian, and she was talking about her background. And I feel very separate from my relatives who didn't talk about Russia, left Russia, you know, like don't consider themselves Russian. But I realized like so many of my friends are like Ashkenazi Jews. Like I was thinking about you actually, and you know, Ethan Nadelman and like you know the founders, like literally everybody who works at Neshama couldn't be here tonight because it's Rosh Hashanah, and I just felt this like extreme like sense of like a lineage and like a heritage, and that was really enjoyable, if not, I guess, a little bit insular, because usually when you have feelings of connectivity, they're not relegated to a racial group, but I felt it deeply in the moment.
well, you know, it's interesting to think about that in terms of how psychedelic experiences dissolve structures, they dissolve defenses, they dissolve kind of our organized ways of experiencing ourselves and in relation to the world. So was there a kind of dissolving of some barrier to that kind of connection to your past, to your history, to your, or that part of your past?
I think so, and perhaps that represents that there had been some kind of barrier because a lot of Jews who leave Russia really burn their past because Russia's a really fucked up place. And a lot of people are desperate to escape. You know, so it's a weird identity where it's like you're both proud of it but also deeply ashamed of it. And then perhaps I felt less of a barrier that this was something you can't talk about. But definitely felt like I was related to Dr. Osher.
But you know, there was another thing that I was really moved by as I was listening to you, your words. You were talking about feeling or being beautiful, being handsome. It seemed like something was, you were having some experience that was giving you permission to love yourself in some way.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you could share something about that.
I strongly recommend for anybody going through a ketamine session to film it and then edit it.
Well, hold on, if I can interrupt. I don't usually interrupt during an integration session, but we're here. I feel like, you know, this is just so tremendously courageous and generous of you.
Thank you. That's very nice of you. I appreciate that. Oh.
I mean, to do this and to share this, it's just was so moving for me.
I really appreciate that because when you're in the editing room, which is to say my couch at 3 o'clock in the morning in my underwear editing after 10 hours, you're like, is this the most self-centered thing I've ever done? And it kind of is, because a lot of healing, a lot of performance is like very self-centered. But what was, and the irony of it is it's an extremely self-centered focus activity, but what the footage is that I'm looking at, like my ego is dissolved. So it was a very kind of strange experience. And I can say that like while I was in that moment, like it was in a flow state, so it's hard to remember. But editing it, I realized that the words that are coming out of my mouth are both, to me, like they're both things I wish I had heard and things I wish I'd said. Because they're things like, you know, I'm proud of you, you did this. And they're also things like you're beautiful. And I know that you're beautiful was something I really did mean towards the doctor and my videographer and everybody in my vicinity. But I know that, you know, I'm proud of you was both directed at her, the doctor, and myself. So in that sense, it was a very ego-dissolving moment because a thought could be both expressed by me and heard by me. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you were experiencing some kind of universal connection. I wondered if beyond sort of the Russian-Jewish connection, but sort of like this connection, you know, sort of speaking to others and speaking to yourself. And where was that coming from?
I think so. Part of ketamine is there's like a really big physical effect to it. Like to me, it felt like a static blanket, like a blanket made of radio static that was like a weight placed on my body. And my nervous system relaxed in a really deep way. And in that moment, I felt how much tension there was in the world, just like how people carry themselves on the street and how people dress and how they look. And I felt kind of a tremendous sadness and an empathy that, you know, we can't all walk around like monks. You know, like we can't have that sort of total relaxation and that opportunity to just be. And that was when I decided to include in the video just a part of me saying, like, there's so much tension and anxiety in the world. A lot of it is like very cliche high thoughts, you know, about like rewiring society. But that is legitimately how I felt. Like immediately, as soon as the ketamine hit, I was like, you have to have this. Like when a baby eats something and they like it and they, you know, put it in your mouth.
So could you name that experience? Can you put words to like what was it that hit you?
There's a word from polyamory called compersion, which I think can be generalized. It means like the love of somebody else's love. It's like kind of like the opposite of Schadenfreude, where it's like instead of joy at somebody's pain, it's joy at somebody's joy. And I guess sort of compersion is the word that I would choose. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wish you were there. You do too.
I wish I was there too with you.
Man, I'm telling you, just host a show about psychedelic.
So I wonder if, as you reflect on what you got from the experience or what the takeaways were, kind of what you can want to hold on to and kind of bring into your life.
So that's an interesting question, because while it was an extremely profound experience and definitely the most removed I've ever felt from this earthly plane, within an hour afterwards, I felt completely back into my body, back into reality. I tried a little test where I tried meditating after, and because I'm a really horrible meditator, did not find any improvements. And I was having a tough time sort of taking anything away from it. And I think part of it has to do with the fact that, given the fact there were videographers in the room, I was given a lower dose, which was insane to me that was a low dose. Holy shit. But, you know, that's what the doctors and administrators were saying, is that, like, for PTSD or depression, they would significantly increase it. And so I was having a tough time, frankly, coming up with a takeaway. I felt a lot of embarrassment, actually, to be totally honest, right afterwards.
About what?
Well, I felt a lot of embarrassment because, well, I think I do feel really worried about, like, am I just being a total exhibitionist all the time? Because that would, everything would suffer if that were the underlying reason for it. And I totally challenge any progress I've made in therapy by undercutting it somehow. And I could feel that happening. Like, oh, you were just on drugs, or like, you know, just undercutting it.
that's the reassertion of all that old programming.
Yeah.
Right. But here's another interesting idea that there's a guy named Gay Hendricks who came up with this concept of the ULP, the upper limit problem. And what he suggests is that we all have a certain set point of pleasure or satisfaction or success, however we define that in life. And that when we get to the upper limit of that, that set point, we start to get anxious, and then we do things to kind of bring ourselves back down.
Oh my God, totally. And it
So
sounds
there
like
you had this experience, and then your old way of bringing yourself back down, like, oh, maybe I'm just being exhibitionistic, you know, whatever.
Totally, and that also...
To kind of spoil it, and now you're back
Yeah.
in your comfort zone.
Totally. Ulp is a perfect word because it also sounds like the sound you would make in that moment.
Yeah. Ulp.
Ulp. I went too far, it felt too good. Ulp.
So there's a great takeaway.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely have to use that because I definitely ulped hard. I'm going to make this a term.
So he suggests once we identify our ulping tendencies,
Yeah.
we can notice them, name it, and then kind of let it go and come back to that experience you were just describing of being completely present and open and anxiety-free.
Totally. How would you, because a lot of people have these kinds of experiences either recreationally or in settings like I had mine in infusion clinics, but they don't see an integration therapist. It's either not offered or they don't want to spend extra money. How would you, I guess my first question is, do you think that's, and I'm kind of switching to interviewer a little bit because I'm really interested in what,
I'll be interviewed.
okay, let's shift position a little bit. Because this is something that's been bothering me. Let's see. Oh, this is the one. Now I'm in interview.
Wait a
okay.
second.
Yeah, we got to switch legs. Do you think integration is mandatory or like the best protocol after a ketamine infusion like that?
Well, first of all, I don't think anything should be mandatory. I mean, no, I really think, right, we all have to find our way to, you know, what's best for us. But I certainly think that some kind of integration process, you know, I mean, sort of taking the experience and trying to put it into language. And we can do that by talking, we can do it by writing, talking to a friend. I mean, so they're an integration circle. But doing something to kind of take that experience and have ways of holding on to it, right? In art, I mean, so there are lots of different activities. But I think it's like, you know, you have this meaningful, powerful, wonderful experience, and there's so much in our programming that, and in our relationships, in our life, that is going to pull us back into our old patterns. So I do think that ideally we have to do some kind of intentional work to hold on to and bring whatever the lessons or the experiences into our lives. But I also think the memory of what we experienced is something that can kind of guide us, even if we're not feeling it and holding on to it in an ongoing way in our lives. But so I do think, and also the research kind of supports that as well, that when there's integration therapy or aftercare work, it enhances even the antidepressant effects and other positive effects. So, and I mean, this brings up a whole other, I think, tremendously important issue in the field of psychedelic therapy or psychedelic healing, and that is that, you know, the work is in the work,
right?
Or the work is in our activities in an ongoing way.
Yeah.
The substance or the experience is a facilitator, or it's a mind manifester, or it's an adjunct, and I think that's one of the biggest problems or pitfalls that people can fall into, thinking that the experience and the substance is what it's all about.
Right.
So if you're in a good therapy, if you're in some good therapeutic or growth process, I think that these experiences can be tremendously valuable as adjuncts, or to kind of speed it up or to deepen it.
So it's kind of like, it's not about the psychedelic, it's about the friends we made along the way. Yeah, got it.
And without like a lot of the friends in the audience
I know.
today, where would we be?
I know, this really is like a group therapy session. Anyway, I have to say, this has actually been very, very helpful, even though there were like a lot of people watching this. But they all need beers now because we've been through a lot of emotion. So we're going to go to a brief intermission, and then I'm going to come back with another amazing, wonderful doctor in the field. So stick around. See you guys in about 5 minutes. it's me. You remember me? I'm the one who took a lot of ketamine and wished you all could feel it. All right, everybody take a seat. Unfortunately, we're not offering ketamine at the bar. I know, just a lesser depressant. See me after, just kidding. Not kidding, just kidding. Anyway, okay, so I've forgotten what the theme is of the show, so just to remind you guys, it is ketamine! There we go. Yeah! Back into the swing of things, yeah. Okay, so that's what the show's about. Glad that you guys still remember. Okay. So, I want to welcome to the stage somebody who's one of the smartest people in the field of ketamine research. He's the calmest person I know. Everybody please welcome Elias Dakwar.
I just sit there and
Thank you.
I just sit there.
All right. Do you want to keep the mask on? All right. Oh, there's that face. You have this effect about you where I just feel like you've never needed anything in your whole life. Is that true?
Well, yeah,
You do need a microphone closer to your mouth.
I try to aim for independence and freedom.
You have achieved that, sir. So thank you so much for being here. You're also a veteran of the show, and so thank you for coming back. So could you tell me, I mean, your background is up on the screen. You're a fucking badass in the world of ketamine. But could you just describe a little bit about like your orientation with ketamine, what you've researched?
Yeah, of course. So the research started for me about 13 years ago. I was principally interested in non-ordinary experience and how it might be helpful for addiction specifically, and how it might serve as a springboard towards independence.
Yeah.
Not needing as much.
Well, you accomplished that, sir.
Well, and helping to inspire others on that path. And, you know, at the time, ketamine was emerging as an antidepressant. The research had just kind of come out of Yale. Roland Griffiths was doing very exciting work with psilocybin again. And it seemed like a tremendous opportunity to legitimize a paradigm that had been buried for a while, the paradigm of non-ordinary experience being helpful, and allowing for patients to enter into states that historically psychiatry has deemed off limits.
Yeah.
For various reasons. Ketamine is legal. It is widely used in anesthetic and pain management settings. We know a lot about it. And so it seemed the ideal medicine to create space for this paradigm to flourish within mainstream psychiatry. And in a way as well that wouldn't fall prey to the dinosaurs of commercialization and big pharma.
Wow.
Because ketamine is generic and can be given very cheaply. So it would necessitate kind of putting the clinical framework first as opposed to privileging the medicine.
I don't know if you saw, though, I took organic ketamine. So maybe mine was just a little bit better than your generic ketamine.
The Upper East Side Whole Foods is much better than the Harlem Whole Foods.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd hoped that it would allow for also a shift in how psychiatry was practiced. And I have to say, the dinosaurs are having their day.
Yeah, they're not dead yet.
You know, the really expensive clinics,
Yeah.
the cash grab with various pharmaceutical companies trying to profit off of ketamine.
Yeah.
Looking at different enantiomers or
to try to
Me
patent
Too
something
compounds. Yeah, or trying to patent it. So it's not great, the way things are turning out. At the same time, there are real opportunities for people who may not be able to afford, you know, $1,000 session to access it.
That's what I was thinking, because in my research, I was very nervous about exactly the issue you're talking about, which is how do market forces affect this powerful medicine? And I realized, I think that there's a trade-off, I'm curious if you agree, between doing something right and greater accessibility. So like people might not try to brand a cheaper form of ketamine that like could increase the accessibility of a novel medicine, which would be good because there's more accessibility. But the problem is they may skimp out on integration or other aspects of it. And I find I'm really torn between wanting these medicines to be available widely, but then also wanting people to do it responsibly.
Well, I think the issue isn't so much with the price of ketamine. It's with the price of how much time people are willing to put into patient encounters, interactions. Ketamine is super cheap, even the organic, locally sourced type. So the real costs are people hours. You know,
right.
The time that a therapist will put in to prepare someone, to sit with the person, to work with the person afterwards. And that's not as lucrative as doing infusions regularly and really making the administration of ketamine the thing. So
do you think, though, like off of this point, because I completely understand where you're coming from. I actually was very nervous going into my experience, partly because it was so absurd. I was doing this legally, and partly because I was like, is this experience not going to have like the normal integration routes like an MDMA or a psilocybin experience might? But I did find ketamine to be like chemically different and less necessitating a psycholytic experience, like a heavily guided experience, and slightly more chemical, slightly more of like a standalone experience. Is that like just my experience, or is that something that's backed up by?
I want to echo the point made earlier that the experiences can be quite varied.
Yeah.
And sitters with ketamine actually, they require a lot more vigilance because
really?
It's very easy to become complacent and think, oh, people are just going to trance out and, you know, commune with the Godhead or have interesting metaphysical ideas and stay quiet. But that doesn't always happen. You know, people will sometimes what's called abreact, you know, where things come up in a very intense way.
Yeah.
And especially if the permission is there for that to happen. And I imagine you were probably feeling echoes or glimmers of that through your experience, that if you were really to delve into some of the more affective content or emotional content, it could have gotten interesting or turbulent.
Possibly,
Yeah. So, and that happens.
It is, though, more sedating. Like, I think that one is both anecdotally true for me, but seems to be a common occurrence.
Right.
As opposed to MDMA, which has something of a stimulant in it.
Or even psilocybin.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That is true, that it does have a more, you know, calming effect. but nonetheless, it can go in interesting directions. And but I think your point is important, that while the experience itself may not require that level of hands-on meddling, or a curated playlist or anything like that, it does still involve an interesting disruption in consciousness that requires some metabolism. Like, let's figure out how we might remember this, attend to it, incorporate its truths into the lies of our lives. So that there is opportunity.
Absolutely.
And the danger with ketamine, I should say, as an addiction person, sometimes people misread what I do and they think I'm a ketamine addiction expert.
Oh.
So
it's better than being a ketamine addict.
So
the official Columbia ketamine addict.
So I have received a lot of referrals from people who have ketamine addictions, and it's a real thing and quite intense.
I have friends who were complete psychonauts, had done everything under the sun, but it was ketamine that made them go to rehab. At least 2 or 3 of them. I don't know. It seems like very much just to your point, could be a drug of abuse.
One of the challenges with ketamine is that there is a refractory period that occurs with other serotonergic hallucinogens. Like, you take it and you can't quite get the same effect if you take it again 10 hours later.
You build a tolerance.
But it's more that there's kind of an attenuated sensitivity to the to the molecule, and so
in a limited time frame.
For a few days or so. Fadiman, for example, James Fadiman recommends microdosing every few days for that reason, as opposed to every day.
Right.
With ketamine, that's not the case. You can continue taking it and pretty much sustain the, ketamine communion for days, weeks on end. And there are people who really fall into that hole. And had some really quite, tragic patients who were seeking something. They invariably describe this sense of being on the cusp of some cosmic, intense truth, and it always eluding them. And kind of continuing to
the
search for
anecdotes
it.
that I had totally match that description as well, of this will reveal to me a truth that felt very conspiracy theory-like you're getting to the bottom of a big mystery. And they described it as sort of candy for intellectual psychonaut types. So I can definitely understand that. But getting back to the integration question, because I am really interested in what are you worried about with the proliferation of ketamine clinics? What are things for people to be on the lookout for as accessibility increases?
Well, I think whenever commerce enters into the situation, there's a forgetting of why we're doing things in the first place. And commerce can sometimes push things in directions that may not give due deference to the essence of the work. So if it's more lucrative, for example, to continue giving infusions as opposed to putting in the man hours for the work,
you would want to
then you're going to see a lot of infusions being given, which is what we're seeing.
But the alternative, of course, is like street ketamine. You need connections, and that is like a super exclusive market. Whereas with commerce, there's widely distributed information with, transparency, some quality assurance. So, in terms of trade-offs, it's hard to think of a better system. But I agree with you, like the motive, the profit motive will always be there, will always be a countering, like an obstacle to overcome. But it's also like everything in healthcare has that same problem. Like, do therapists really want to heal you if they want ongoing clients? Like, they can't heal their patients all the time. Does the VA, which gets government funding to cure PTSD, like, is that its motive for existing, or is that its source of funding? Like, it just seems like healthcare is impossible. Like, I just think that's the conclusion of the show, that healthcare is impossible.
The end.
The end. You heard it from here first.
Those are important points that, compared to black market oven-cooked ketamine, which is probably not organic.
Yeah.
The existing.
It is all natural, handmade, artisanal.
The existing framework is probably better.
Yeah.
But we return to this point, though, of like, what are we doing?
Right.
Like, people are coming to us suffering, wanting to feel better in a way that's enduring, wanting some sense of mastery over their lives, wanting greater capacity for love, joyfulness, peace, presence. And here's a medicine that can give access to moments of that, right? And may, if incorporated into a labor-intensive psychotherapeutic framework, might leverage those moments into something more foundational and enduring. That's the work ahead of us. Mm-hmm. But if the interests are in making really nice clinics that are lucrative and make a franchise of it, then we may lose something, and we may forget what the work is. That's my concern, and that's
I totally understand that concern, especially as lozenges and nasal sprays become widespread, which are routes of administration that can be done without somebody in the room or present, that have been done virtually over Zoom, which, you could view that many different lenses. Like, once again, increases accessibility for agoraphobes, can get, ketamine infusions. But on the other hand, they're not necessarily doing it in the best ideal circumstances, with an integration therapist there. So I find I'm very torn about the issue, and I share your concerns. So, like, what would you say to people who are, like, in this field about what they could do to, steer the course of their clinics towards a good direction?
Well, what I really appreciated about the way this night has proceeded is that you created space for a group integration, in the sense that we were all there with you, and listening, and I think experiencing many of the same challenges that you were articulating. So having communal opportunity for that, creating space for people to talk about these things, given how broken the system is, given that it's going to be difficult for a lot of us to find therapists, to have the resources to go to therapists to that level. Finding the integration where we can, having the conversations, allowing ourselves to feel vulnerable, to discuss things that might feel incredibly private, but once we articulate them, resonate with everyone.
I think that is really beautiful. And, unfortunately I'm getting the red light, but I really thank you for saying that, because I was very nervous about the show. And I think, one of the most important motifs, as like a takeaway, is to find integration where you can. So thank you all so much for coming. Please come again. I really appreciate it. This has been Drug Test. Yeah. Oh, really?
Inside, outside, upside down. Everything is turning around. Backward, forward, which is right? Black is day and white is night. Smell the air, it's real uptight. I just sit there and I just sit there. Strippers, strippers, hips are square, divide.